From To Keto LLC, it's Keto Woman Podcast with Daisy Brackenhall.
Hello Keto Lovelies, I'm Daisy Brackenhall, and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence, and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. Keto has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman Podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs to 20 grams or less per day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds and the incidental carbs you find in things like dairy. Moderate protein scaled to your lean body mass, and then fat to satiety. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalised keto. I'll be asking my guests each week what their keto looks like to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we can't give you medical advice. It's always best to work with your own doctor because they know you and your medical history and so have access to the bigger picture. Thank you, Carol O'Carroll, for supporting me and this podcast by making a pledge at my Patreon page. Do you want to hear your name here at the top of the show? Are you enjoying this podcast and would like to help me make more episodes? Then head to my Patreon page at patreon.com/KetoWoman or hit the support button on the Keto Woman Podcast website. It means a great deal to me and you will get to headline the show just like Carol did today. This week's extraordinary woman is Jeanne Wagner. Jeannie is a 48-year-old photographer who has a day job at a local college in the workforce education department, doing marketing, social media and training for her department. She has a wonderful husband of 11 years and together they've rescued 7 cats, 4 cockatiels, a squirrel and 2 parakeets, of which 5 of the cats and the 2 parakeets remain. She was raised in the dairy farm countryside of upstate New York and moved down to Florida when she was 12. Having had weight gain since the age of 6, she has struggled with her health and weight most of her life. After many failed diets, a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes 12 years ago, and a roller coaster ride with more failed diets, she feels that she has finally come across the answers to her prayers in finding the keto way of life. She is new to the keto way of eating, just a couple of months in, but she is single-minded in her efforts to reverse her diabetes and become healthy again. I'm looking forward to checking back in with Jeannie down the line to see how she's getting on. But for now, let's find out how she's been doing in these first few months. Welcome, Jeannie, to the Keto Woman Podcast. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Great. It's good to have you here today. Now, we're going to be talking about all things newbie to keto today. I thought it would be really interesting to hear someone's experience who just recently started keto, as you have. But to set the scene, tell me a bit about your history and what issues you had that led you to look for keto in the first place.
Okay, well, I've been overweight basically all my life since I was about 6 or 7 years old, and we don't know why. I was a normal skinny kid up until someday I just started plumping out. And I've just been dealing with that all my life. I've tried little diets here and there, and they would work for a little bit. I would lose that 10, 15, 20 pounds in the first 3 to 6 months, and then it would level out and stop, and I would gain again. When I hit my mid-30s, I started feeling bad, and I ignored it for a while. but we had diabetes in the family on my mother's side, and I decided I needed to go to the doctor. So I finally did, and I got the diagnosis. So I had blood glucose reading of 253 or something like that. And I was in my 200s and weight-wise. So, it's the famous female fat and 40 diagnosis, which I wasn't quite 40, but close enough. And
yes, because that's pretty high, that
blood glucose.
That glucose, isn't it? Yes, I translated because I'm not good with the American system, but yes, it comes out at around about 14, which is yes. I did a little gasp.
Super high.
I did a little gasp when I read that. That's pretty high, isn't it?
It's super high, and my eyes bugged out, and my body went numb, and I was like, no, that's not possible. I said, check it again. And he looked at me and he said, okay, well, we'll check it again. You never know. There could be something wrong with the results. And we waited about a month. And during that time, I went out and tried to read a lot of information about the type 2 diabetes. I got the Diabetes for Dummy book, and it said basically all the things I kind of already knew, but also if you smoked, you are just waiting. You're just asking for an amputation. And I was like, no, because I smoked, was stupid. I had picked it up in my mid-20s. And so I then started on a plan to get off smoking, to stop. But back to the story, he, in a month, he said, yeah, you went down maybe 10 or 20 points, but you're still up there. So it was official, which he already knew. He was just humoring me, I'm sure. But then we decided to, or he just showed me a plan for a diet. It was like this front and back page, simple guideline meal plan. And of course, it was your typical low fat, high carbohydrate, low protein as well type of diet. And I followed it to the T, but even one step further. Instead of having about 40 grams of fat a day, I said, well, 20, less than 20. That should be even better. I should lose tons of weight. I should get healthy, da-da-da. I came back in 3 months for my checkup. I'd lost 30 pounds. And he said, what are you doing? He says, are you doing some kind of fad diet? I don't want you doing a fad diet. I just want you to follow the guidelines. I said, no, I am doing what you're told me to do, but I'm even less on the fat. So he was like, okay. He wanted me to get some exercise. So I started strength training, which led into cardio training. And I continued with the food, basically the same. I would have salads with no fat, dressing, and all of the meats had no fat in them. There was chicken breasts, no skins, very little amounts of it, like maybe 3 ounces a day, and that type of thing. So
all that typical calorie counting stuff.
Absolutely.
And then just being petrified of that calorie-rich fat.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I thought it was great. I was like, yeah, I'm losing weight. This is wonderful. The only problem was I was hungry all the time, like 24/7. I feel like I would be hungry in my sleep. It was really bad. But everybody was very happy with my progress, and I had people telling me, it'll go away, your stomach's going to shrink, you're not going to have this hunger forever, it's all in your head, you've been addicted to food all these years, all these decades, you got to give it some time, it's not going to come off immediately. So I'm like, okay, all right, just got to hold the course, just got to concentrate, buckle down, keep going, and it never stopped. And eventually, after about 6 or 9 months, again, it plateaued. I started gaining weight. And I didn't know what to do from there. I just kind of towed the line and just kept doing it as best I could. But then that was about 2008. and we had the quote unquote Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of places were going out of business. A lot of restaurants were going out of business because people were not eating out. They were conserving their money. And that's one of the first things people start cutting out of their budget is food and entertainment. So he worked at a restaurant. He was a manager. And one day they told everybody to lock the doors and go home.
Wow.
And that was it. They never opened up again. And for 17 months, he was looking for a job. It was a tough environment. But we were able to make that through. All I had to do was cut out all the wonderful natural foods I was buying, and the gym membership went out the window. And somewhere along the line, I developed this horrible pain in my legs. It wasn't ever identified, but if I even skimmed the surface of my flesh, it would make me crawl out of my skin. It was so painful, hard to describe, but I kind of lived on that level for 2 years, and it eventually died down over time, but I couldn't jog anymore. I couldn't even walk vigorously, and the gym, there's no way I could do that strength training and all that anymore. So I stopped eating well, of course, at that time, and I stopped the exercise, and after the plateau happened, then it just started coming back, 10 pounds a month or whatever. After a few months, the 55 pounds I had lost just came right back, and I think I ended up being 20 or 30 pounds heavier.
Isn't it amazing how much faster it goes back on than it comes off?
Oh my goodness. Yes.
It's scary,
I could feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it. I could feel it. And I was like, oh, this isn't good.
Especially when it's carb heavy, you literally feel yourself expanding and bloating with it, don't you, as it goes on?
Yes, and I had a tendency to get rid of the older clothes. As I went down in sizes, I went down to about a regular 14, 16, which was a thrill for me because I had started out in like the 22, 24 women's sizes, which are very large. And I was so excited about being in those quote unquote regular sizes, even though they were still large. I hadn't seen that since my high school days, like 30 years ago. So I had been happy about that. So I had to start buying new clothes again.
So you've not only, you did everything you were told to do, but despite that, you hit a plateau. You were eating what you were told to eat, despite the fact that you were starving hungry all the time. You were pounding it down at the gym.
2 hours a day.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get hit financially with your husband losing his job and things like that. And as you said, your diet changed and you stopped going to the gym, but your diet became much richer in the carbohydrates again. And it's interesting what you were saying about these pains in your legs, and that got worse when you upped your carbs. Do you think it was completely down to diet, or because you said it started getting better? Now, did it start getting better while you were still eating the same diet, or was it, only after you started changing your diet that started improving? I'm just wondering how much it was diet and how much maybe it was down to stress.
Great question, and I've thought about this for so long, and I want to say in the end, I think it was some sort of vascular situation. I think that it took some months to get to where it was because I had no pain prior to my dietary changes. And then I had the varicose veins. They had been around since my teen years. And of course, they just got bigger and worse over time. And there are some varicose veins in my right leg, which is the one that has the most pains, even to this day. And after I stopped eating, the guidelines diet and went back to pastas and tons of bread and rice and all kinds of things like that, it eventually died down. But again, it did take those couple of years. I really don't know. I want to say it does have a lot to do with the diet and exercise combination, because we know that low fat, high carb diet is bad for the body. And with all that stress of the exercise, I was doing so much every day, the 2 hours at the gym. I was also jogging a mile every day and walking my butt off, just trying to get those calories out. And I think that combination is what did it. And I think it just took a really long time to die down, because I was eating so poorly in the other direction after it happened. So even now, I've been doing keto for a couple months now. It's still kind of constant, but I can see like this little itty bitty tiny change. It's like starting to get a little better. So my hope is that my body will just continue to heal and it will eventually go away.
Yes, well, hopefully so. I mean, we hear so many stories about people who've had all sorts of things that they've found improvements with. So hopefully that's going to be one of those things with you.
Yeah.
So I've sidetracked you there a little bit, because it sounds such an awful thing, and it always helps, I think, if you know exactly what's causing it, because it means you can do something about it. But when you're unsure exactly what the cause is, it's so much more difficult to resolve, isn't it?
Yes, I had taken it to my doctor after like a month or two of enduring it, and he thought it might possibly be an embolism. So he did some touch tests, and there was nothing. It wasn't that. So he just looked at me and said, I don't know what it is. So I did some research, and I tried to figure it out. But there's that, I'm trying to remember the name of the pain. Like you have to have it in 22 different places in your body for them to consider that's what it is.
Right, that's
and
interesting.
I only had like 5 or 6, and that wasn't gonna fly. So yeah, it just kind of was this mystery, and I just was always monitoring it because, you can't not. I couldn't sleep well. I had to sleep on one side of my body versus the other, and even sleeping was tough. So I'm just glad it's over. I consider it to be over because it doesn't affect my life anymore in that way.
Yes, well, it's certainly something nice to put behind you. So you'd got to this place where you'd gained pretty well all your weight back. Presumably you'd seen your blood glucose levels starting to go back up again.
Yes.
You were, presumably there was also the impact with struggling financially. I was thinking that actually when you said about getting rid of your old, larger clothes, that must have been just an extra nasty pill to swallow when you didn't have the money to go out and buy these clothes that you'd got rid of.
Oh yes, goodwill becomes your friend at that point.
Absolutely. So what happened then?
Well, I kind of drifted for a long time. For years, I did the best I could with my diet, with the information I had at the time. So I ate salad a lot, like all the time. And I would have that imitation crab meat on it because I just loved it. I thought it was tasty. And we would do chicken sometimes or just plain salad. That was me. And then my husband would eat. Sometimes he would eat that with me, but lots of times he would have his own food. Sometimes he would have like meat and potatoes and some kind of vegetable. He goes by the 3 food groups on your plate at all times, and that's what he likes. So we don't argue about that. We just let it happen. And yes, my blood sugar started to rise. It started to get in. It had always been during the time where I was really doubling down. It had gotten down to the point where I was down to 1 pill a day. I was on metformin. That's all I ever was on. And I was getting close to being off of it, actually. I didn't mention that before, but that was part of my driving force, which I felt so successful with it. But of course, that progress all went out the window as I started eating poorly again. And it just went up into the 120s and then the 150s and then the 170s. And I tried to start walking again, And that was sort of helpful, but not really. And in the end, I kind of gave up. And I hate to say it. I hate to admit to it, but I just ate what I wanted. And I just said, well, there's nothing that's going to be able to help this. And I'm just going to just do this. I had gone to see a natural doctor who was encouraging me to do the vegetarian route. And I would go back to them like once a year or something, because they would still let me have the metformin without checking in every 3 months. I guess in a way I got lucky, in a way I didn't, because then it didn't push me to find more answers or try harder. But they would keep saying, come to our education class, listen to, the doctor's story about he beat colon cancer and, try to get back into the lifestyle that's going to help you. And I couldn't. At that point, I just couldn't bear to be hungry all the time. I mean, not like I wasn't kind of already, but at least I felt like I could eat something when I wanted to, when I got hungry. Whereas before, I felt like I gotta wait. And it was always that typical 2 to 3 hour meals, eat 6 meals a day, 3 main ones with your 2 or 3 snacks.
Mm-hmm. And none of them very satisfying.
None of them, you could have, and that was based on carbs. I was so carb driven. I had so many carbs in my pre-diabetic life that when I went and took on the diabetic guideline diet, I actually had to cut my carbs, which I know is awful. But such as it was, that's the way it was with me. And so I always felt deprived in the carb area just because of that, So I'm like, 15 carbs on my snack. What am I going to have for my 15 carbs? I always had to plan that out. And it was never about satisfying whole foods, which thank goodness it is now. But that whole drifting lasted until probably about April to May of last year, 2017, when some really good friend of ours, one of our good friends, started having problems with his eyes. He's also type 2. He had self-regulated his blood sugars. He had gone off his medicine. And he had existed like that for a number of years, just eating to control. And I thought that was wonderful for him. And he had lost all this weight, and he looked thin, and he looked wonderful. But then he had started getting sick. And I don't think it was ever determined exactly what that sickness was, but he got even thinner, and he looked pale and haggard. And then he started having problems with his eyes. So he went to the eye doctor, and they confirmed that he had the diabetic complications with eyes, diabetic retinopathy or something like that. I'm not sure the exact medical terminology, but he did have to have those shots in his eyes to try to cauterize the little blood vessels. And he's been going through that since then, and it terrified me. I went, oh, this is your wake-up call. You are heading down this road. And you're not even regulating your blood sugar. And I have dodged a bullet every year. I go to the eye doctor and I'd be like, okay, what do you see back there? What is it like? Am I starting to get glaucoma? And, what's happening? And they're like, nope, you're doing fine. You're doing great. The pressure in your eye is good. But for the last 2 years, it's been on the high side of normal. So I'm like, I feel like I'm creeping up there. So he went through this, and I started thinking to myself, okay, you just got to do something. You have got to find something that's going to help get you back on track.
Because what was he doing then? Because you said what he was doing seemed to be working, and he got off his medications and things, but he ended up in this position of it still affecting his eyes. So there must have been something missing there. Presumably, if he was controlling, he must have known what his blood glucose was, and it was good. So I'm just wondering why he was then, he ended up having these problems.
I don't know if he turned into a skinny diabetic. I should have talked to him to find out, but I just didn't want to pry too much because I know he's kind of sensitive about it, and upset for obvious reasons. He thought he was doing well.
Of course. Maybe he stopped actually doing that, working to the meter, thought he had it down pat and he stopped. I don't know. It just sounds like a weird contradiction when things seem to be going so well. It would just be
exactly.
Yeah, just interesting to know what went on there. But anyway, for you it was a real wake up call that you needed to do something before you got to that point.
Yeah, that really was. I have got to say that was it. That was the thing that finally shook me up. So I didn't really do any research at that point, but I started thinking in my mind, you've got to find something. You've got to read a book. You've got to listen to a podcast. You have to do something. And I didn't know what to do. The last time I had tried to do research on curing diabetes or regulating blood sugar, it always comes up with the vegan diets and the vegetarian diets. And I'm like, no, there's got to be something else.
Don't fancy that.
I can't live like that. And I am mentored by a photographer. I do photography. And so I have this wonderful mentor who has gone through a weight loss journey herself. And on her website that she has for her members is a book list. And I had been one by one going through all these books, and I had been ignoring one book because all the others were about business. And I'm like, oh yeah, I need to know all this business stuff because I gotta, learn how to run my business. But there's this other one out there. It was a health book. And I'm like, no, I've already read these health books. I did that those years ago, those 10 years ago. I've read them all. I don't know what this is going to say. And I just saved it for last. And then it sat there for a couple months. And I'm like, all right, you spent $14 on worse things. Just go ahead and listen to it and see what it does. And if you don't like it, you don't have to listen to it. Right? You don't have to follow the advice. So I went and got it on Audible. And that was the book Wheat Belly by William Davis, MD. And I think I read the first 3 chapters and I was like, oh, this is it.
Light bulb moment.
The answer. The light bulb. I'm not talking light bulb. I'm talking stadium lights came on and shone down on me. And I immediately quit the gluten and the grains and the wheats. And it only took me about a week to adjust to that. Because something happens with me that my brain will click over and I'll just be in this mode where it's easy somehow. And that's what happened the first time around. That's why I was able to just go straight into what I needed to do and lose the weight and blah, blah, blah. And this time wasn't any different. And I knew in my mind I would need to be able to hit that state. I would need to read something so impactful that it would cause my mind to click over. Because I know how difficult it was to drop the sugars out of my life. I was totally addicted to them. I ate candy all the time. I ate bread all the time. It was a mess. So I'm reading this book. It's changing my life. I'm like sometimes just crying reading it because I just couldn't believe it. It was really good.
It's good when someone gets you, even though you don't know them from Adam. It's it's quite something, isn't it? Just to read that.
Yes. So I am to this day, I'm incredibly thankful that I was guided to this book. I was led to this book. I finally decided to read the book, and I followed that for 4 to 5 months. And I cut out all those grains and wheats and glutens, except I did not cut out fruit. I would still have an orange. I would still have an apple. I would still have my blueberries. Those are my 3 main fruits, and occasionally mangoes, my favorite fruits. And I would have them as a treat at night, like as a dessert. And I tried to regulate them to maybe one a day. And sometimes oranges are my downfall. I would eat 2 of them. I just couldn't help myself. But then I knew that wasn't good for my blood sugar. But I did it anyway because I thought, I'm being so good at this other stuff. This will take time for my body to adjust and I'll eventually be all right. But after about a month, I had checked my blood glucose because I wanted to give my body time to adjust to that. And I had been consistently in the 270s before all this. And after that first month or so, I did a reading and it was 177.
Wow, that's quite a jump.
It's a big jump and it's still 100 points higher than it needed to be. So I'm like, okay, this is really good. I mean, something's working here. So I'm on the right path. And I waited another month. And I thought, well, maybe it'll be even lower this next time because, I'll have continued. And I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing. Just continue on this path. And I read it again. It was still, it was maybe 2 points difference. So I knew at that point that this wasn't enough, that I needed to do more. So I thought to myself, what am I going to do now? I don't know what to do. And it just came up at work one day. I was talking to some of my friends, and this lady who, she's also my friend, but we don't ever talk diet or anything. She just happened to overhear me talk about how I had given up the grains and the glutens, and it helped with a little bit of my weight. I could feel like my clothes fit better. But I don't have a scale, so at that time I didn't know what difference there was in the weight. But the blood glucose was the big thing for me. And she said to me, you know what? You know what the next thing for you is? The next natural progression. And I said, what? And she says, keto. And I said, what? I had never heard of that before, ever. I heard of paleo, which is another O word, but that's how my brain works. And I said, well, is it like paleo in any way? And she's like, well, kind of, but not really. They still do a lot of the honey and maple sugars and other types of sweet things that we don't do in keto. And I said, okay, well, how do I find out about this? And she says, start listening to podcasts. I said, okay. I said, well, I'm not really into podcasts. There was one I listened to at the time, and it was a home decorating one, that Young House Love. Some people may know about that one. But anyway, nothing health related. And I said, well, okay, well, I can give that a try. And she says, start with Livin' La Vida Low Carb by this guy named Jimmy Moore, and listen to a few of them. Tell me what you think. I said, all right, I'll do that. So it took me about 2 weeks to actually go find the podcast, start downloading them and listening to them. And it was, he has 1,300 and some podcasts by this point.
I was going to say, there's quite a back catalogue there to choose from, isn't there?
Yes. He has so many, and I've learned so much even since then. But where I started landing was when he had uploaded past low carb cruises from 2016 or 2015, and they were these talks by the doctors and the research scientists. And I started listening to those. Those was my very first introductions to the keto information, like Gary Taubes and Maria Emmerich and
great.
So many others.
Can't get much better.
Oh my goodness. I was my mind was swirling. I was doing this walk contest at work. So every night after work, I would go home and I would walk. It was just a steps thing. It was like a healthy thing. I was like, walking's great. I'll do walking. And I got to listen to these podcasts every night when I walked, which was the perfect situation. There wasn't anybody bothering me or interrupting me, and I could stop and rewind at if I wanted to go back and listen to something. So yeah, I probably listened to many dozens of those, and started feeling really great about what I was doing. So I started dabbling. I started throwing in some more concepts of keto in about the November time. And I was so afraid of fat. I thought, well, I heard what they said. I heard about what it does for the body. And I see the charts and I see the results, and I still am afraid. But let's try it. Let's just do it anyway. And all of a sudden, I wasn't hungry anymore. I started putting more fat into the diet, somewhere between that 65 to 75, 80 range percentage of the calorie intake per day. And all of a sudden, I didn't need to eat 3 times a day or even twice a day. Sometimes I could just eat once a day, and there wasn't any snacking. Like snacking? What is that?
And that must have been a big change for you because, it was something that was obviously very important before, where you've tried different things to, try and get this blood glucose and your weight down. But the thing that you said that every time was the biggest issue was just that you were so starving all the time. So this must have been, well, wow. I like this way.
Oh, it was such a revelation, such a freeing moment and time period.
It's great, isn't it? Not to just feel that food has this control over you, that you're always thinking about it and you're some kind of slave to it. It's really nice to, like you say, it gives you that feeling of control back, doesn't it?
Yes, it's just as bad as being addicted to cigarette smoking, which I was. And I had, again, systematically quit that too. So
in some ways, because I'm an ex-smoker as well, and it took me 2 goes to give it up. Actually, I did give it up, and then I went back to it, and I gave up again. And it's a really hard thing to do, but in a way, I found it a lot easier than I did trying to lose weight and give up certain kinds of food. Because the thing with cigarettes is, you either smoke or you don't. You can just completely cut them out of your life, but you can't do that with food. You do have to eat, and you do have to make choices about what food you're having. That, for me, was what made giving up cigarettes, relatively speaking, so much easier.
Well, it wasn't easy for me, but I was very adamant. I was very focused and very sure that this was going to happen some way, somehow. And what eventually happened to me is I just weaned myself off of it. It took me 3 months. And I said, every day you're going to have 1 cigarette less. That's what you're going to do. And not that I was smoking 3 packs a day, but over time I did do this. And it was December. I was down to 1 a day. And honestly, it was like 11 years ago, so I don't remember what I did with that 1 a day. Was it the morning? Was it at night? Was it in the middle of the day? I can't remember. But I had 1 a day, and I thought, oh, what am I going to do? I can't give up this 1 a day.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is she going to start cutting them in half?
Yeah, that's hilarious. No, I did not do that. But I did something really weird. I prayed. I said to all the higher powers, just get me sick. Let me be sick. Give me this really bad cold, and I'll be able to quit. Because in my mind, I knew that when I had a bad cold, I would not smoke, or I'd smoke a whole lot less, like super amount less. And I just knew that this would allow me to just not pick it up again. I would be able to put it down for that time period of the illness and then just not ever pick it up, because I was at that pivotal point. So that's what I asked for. That's what I got. And that's what happened. So I got sick for a week. And at the end, I never picked it back up. And it's a strange story, but that's what happened.
I just had these visions of, you gradually cutting the cigarette down until it was just this tiny little bit that you got to smoke every day.
That's another way of doing it. I never even thought of that.
Well, good thing you didn't think of it.
Yeah. At that time, I had really freaked out my cardiologist because I had these heart palpitations, and I had them for, 20 years. I had them for a long time. And during my near vegetarian vegan experience to lose my 55 pounds, they got worse, really bad. And so I said to my doctor, I need to get this checked out. I think something's wrong here. And so he gave me EKG. I wore this harness for like a week and nothing came of it. They said we couldn't see anything. But here, why don't you go get a stress test? We'll see if anything comes up with that. So I did that. I had the injection and I did the treadmill and I had the heart scan and they said, you're perfectly fine. Your heart's not enlarged. We can't see anything going on with it. Don't worry about it. I said, yeah, but these palpitations are crazy loud and I can feel them. I can hear them. And he's looking at me and saying, no one ever feels them. I don't understand what's wrong with you, but don't worry about it. I said, okay, fine. So I came back like a month or two later, and that was during that November, December time period where I quit smoking. And right before I had started a plateau. So I quit smoking. I went back a month later. I had lost 5 pounds. And he says, that's impossible. No one quits smoking and loses weight. I said, well, it happened to me. He says, well, I'm not sure if I believe that, but okay. And he was one of those by the book guys, you know. He says, your problem is your right hand. Hand to mouth, your fork. That's your problem. Just stop. Quit eating. I'm like, great. Thanks so much for the good advice. And I haven't been back to get my heart looked at since then, but I still have them, but it's nothing like it was. And now it takes mere moments for it to get back into alignment. So I do feel like I need to go back and get another checkup just because it's been so long and I had all those years of being bad with diet. So I should give it a try. And of course, now I want to get the calcium scan and I want to see what the real deal is and not just a regular scan that they do.
Yeah, I think a lot of us get addicted to wanting to test everything once we start keto and start feeling better and you know, watching and listening to all these talks about all these amazing things. You want to start getting some data of your own, don't you?
Yes, baselines and see how I progress.
Yeah. So you sort of dabbled a bit in keto in November and December, but really got stuck in the new year, I believe.
Yes. My friend again, who had said, you know, your next thing is keto, had started talking about how she was fasting. And I was like, I know what that is. That doesn't sound good. I mean, that sounded really scary to me. I thought, not eating. I said, all right, I'm doing a lot better here with being satiated and the fat carrying me for many more hours and me being able to sleep overnight and not actually eat until maybe lunch. I mean, I could do that. And she's like, oh, no, I mean like, 20 hours. And I'm thinking, oh, no, I would be ravenous by then. I'd think I'd be miserable and I would be cranky and hangry and no. And she's like, well, that's just something I've been doing. And she told me the name of a lady whose webpage she had been following. And I want to be able to tell you this, but I forgot her name. But I looked into that a little bit and I thought, well, that's something to think about, but not right now. But, the bug had been put in my brain and it wouldn't go away. So, of course, I wanted to know more. So I started listening to 2 Keto Dudes. And that was another little tip she gave me because I had still just been listening to Livin' La Vida. And because there's just such a wealth of information there. It's just like you'll never run out. But the 2 Keto Dudes, they talk about fasting all the time. And I didn't start at the number 1 episode with them. I think I started at the current one that was back in November, December. And when they were speaking about it and how it was no big deal, the advice given by Megan Ramos and Dr. Fung and the obesity code and the fasting guide and all these things just started coming into line and started lining up. And I'm like, wow, I think I can do this. And I think if I'm ever going to break my insulin resistance and get off this medicine and become normal again and get my metabolism not deranged, I got to do it. I don't have a choice. So again, I've got this single-minded thought in my head, I got to start doing the fasting. So I did the fasting for a whole week, Monday through Friday. And I did a 22-hour fast every day. And I wasn't a complete water fast, though. It was one with a bulletproof coffee in it. So my bulletproof coffee, since I'm still kind of a newbie, is that super simple. It's got heavy whipping cream and butter in it, good Kerrygold stuff. And I would whip that in real good. And to me, it tasted great. I didn't even need to use a hand blender, but for me, that worked perfectly, and it would hold me over. And yes, it was a couple hundred calories, but as a brand new fasting person experimenting, that's what got me through my hungry hump.
It was a good lead in, isn't it? And Megan Ramos talks about things like that as training wheels, which I think is a really good way of looking at it.
Yes, it's perfect for that. And I had seen some success with my blood glucose, which I hadn't mentioned yet, but I went down into the 120s after starting keto back in November, December. And so I'm like, yeah, just 50 more points to go and I'll be in a regular range. So, I'm thinking in the 70s. So at the end of that fourth day, I checked my blood sugar in the morning and it was 77.
Nice.
And I did a happy dance and I yelled hallelujah, and I ran and I got my husband and I showed him the meter and I'm like, I'm normal again. And it was just like a really exciting moment of victory. So at that moment, at that very precise moment, I knew this was it. This was the answer. This was going to cure me.
To use some intermittent fasting alongside the keto. So, yeah, what's your keto look like from the start? Because I think those of us who've been doing it for a while changes quite a lot from where we start out. So I'd be interested to hear what yours looked like when you started.
Mm-hmm. Sure. One thing is I did not track ounces or grams. I did not have a little app yet to plug in all of my macros yet, but I had done the macrometer on the Two Keto Dudes ketogenic forum site, and I saw that calculator. So I used it as just a general guide, and so I was trying to be 75-80% fat with the about 70 grams of proteins and 20 or less grams of carbs a day. And I ate a lot of eggs and bacon, which I still do. I don't eat it every day, but that's because I'm too lazy to get up super early to have that breakfast if and when I'm hungry. But 99.9% of the time, I'm not a breakfast eater, so I don't even get hungry until lunch or 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But I'll have a salad for lunch with avocado in it and walnuts. So I get a little bit of protein and get some good dietary fat with my avocado. And if I'm feeling froggy, I'll have a whole avocado in there. So it's really filling. It's very interesting how filling the avocado is. Mm-hmm. So I'll have that with just a very simple salad. I like cucumbers and tomatoes, and I'll just put in some olive oil and vinegar. I had been using Newman's Own olive oil and vinegar, but I had still had gastrointestinal problems with that, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together until one day I tried having my salad without it and just oil and vinegar, and that's what did it. I'm like, oh, I hadn't realized that those extra spices in that salad dressing alone would cause so much problems. It was pretty an amazing discovery, actually.
Yes, it's incredible, isn't it, how such a tiny little amount of something, but if it doesn't suit you, it can really throw you off.
Yeah. And so then also in the beginning, I would definitely have dinner every night. So I would have the grass-fed hamburger. I would have kielbasa sausage. I would have steaks, chicken thighs with the skin on it, and just seasoned to taste with simple salt and pepper. But to me, that's very tasty. So it's not like it wasn't good enough or anything. And I would have a spinach. I would have Brussels sprouts. I would have asparagus. Those are my leafy greens. Those are my favorites. So I am very simple with the diet at this point, even today, because I feel like in my head, I want to get this in my head. Like I don't even have to think about it anymore. And then, I don't have any starches, right? So I found out about mashed cauliflower mash, which was like another light bulb went off. It's so delicious.
Pretty delicious, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I make it all the time. So it's my favorite thing right now. If I do have something that's quote unquote a starch, replacement.
Yeah, so you're keeping it really quite simple. You haven't been playing around with any of the sort of keto treats and keto baked goods and things like that?
Not quite. I did in the beginning. Oh, I do remember talking to another podcast, a guest, where you buy all the baked goods in the beginning and you're making all this great stuff, the breads and the keto treats and all this. So I'm like, well, I did. I went out, blew a whole bunch of money. I wanted to make these great little desserts that were, carb friendly. And I only ended up making this stuff called keto bread, which was a 7-egg recipe and very simple and delicious. It tastes more like cornbread than regular bread. And it was a little bit of a got to get used to this, but it didn't take long. And I love it with the Kerrygold, and it is so filling. One thin slice will do you, and I'm good to go. So that's basically the thing I make. And one time I made a pumpkin roll with some nice Swerve cream filling, which had some coffee taste in it, which had some coffee grounds added to it for a nice coffee taste. And that was a great hit at Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do stuff like that for the holidays. But that's about it. I don't really make a lot of treats.
But overall, yes, it sounds like you keep it quite simple.
Yeah, for me right now, that's what I need to do. But I know over time I'll add things as I go and have a bigger repertoire.
So these first few months then, it sounds like have been quite easy for you, quite enjoyable.
Oh, yes. Yes, it's been really wonderful. And my family is supportive. They're still giving me the little stink eye a little bit. Like, they're not sure. They're just waiting to see what this is going to do with me.
So is it just you who's doing it? Or, are your yes. family involved too?
No, my husband likes to eat what he likes to eat. But, if I make something, he eats it. Because it's mostly everything he likes anyway, except the starch is no longer a part of it. So, for instance, on Valentine's Day, I wanted to make everybody a really great keto dinner, which I posted in the forums. And it was ribeye steak and asparagus and the cauliflower mash. And it was wonderful. It was a really thick ribeye steak, so I went, all out on that. And I seared it in the pan, and it came out delicious. I had a nice seasoning going on there, nice crisp outer shell, nice
yummy.
Juicy in the middle. So he loved it. He's like, yeah, this is great. But at the same time, he'll say things like, oh, he's on his way home. So he's a delivery driver, and he'll call me on the way home sometimes just to keep him company. And he's driving down the road past these restaurants, and he's like, oh, you can't eat there. Nope, you can't eat there. No, not there. I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, oh, I'm going past these restaurants, thinking about places we can go out to eat, go out and have some fun. And I said, well, what are these restaurants? I said, I can eat out. I don't understand why you think I can't. And it's like all these steak places and burger joints. And I'm like, of course I can eat there. I said, I just stay away from potatoes and rice and bread and pasta, because those are the main types of extras that they'll add on as, their sides and whatnot. I said, I stick to the meats, I stick to the green salads and vegetables, and I'm good to go. I said, I can eat plenty of things.
Yeah, so I just stick to the good stuff.
I have not let that stop me. We've gone out plenty of times. So in the very beginning, say back in December, when I was playing around with it still, I decided, all right, let's have a sweet potato. And I had a sweet potato, and I didn't eat the whole thing, but it was really tasty. All of a sudden, I loved sweet potatoes. I had never really liked them before. Something about them they were too sweet, and I felt like a potato shouldn't be sweet. It's just, I'm a white potato person, I suppose. But I loved it. And then I went home and checked my blood sugar, and it had spiked, 50 points or something. And I'm like, all right, no more sweet potatoes. Forget that. So it was like this little experiment. And so that was that, and I think I might have had a few bites of one more time after that, and I haven't had one since, because I know what it does, and not that it's a bad food, and some people out there can handle more carbs, but I can't. That's my specific situation, that I know I am not able to handle that sweetness.
That's the advantage of testing, isn't it? You can see exactly what it's doing to you.
Yep. And then there was the failed experiment of having a couple bites of cheesecake, which is like my favorite thing in the world. And that was a disaster. I spent the rest of the night in the bathroom after that. So never again. And no more cakes, no more. And I don't miss it because I know how horrible it's going to make me feel. And that is like, it's negative reinforcement if you want to think of it that way. But I'm trying to now focus on all the wonderful things I can have instead of what I can't.
I think that's a really good attitude to have, instead of thinking about what you can't have, or thinking about all the great things that you can, because, there's a very wide choice of what you can have, and it's all delicious. So that's good.
Yes. And it's just so good. Real food, fresh food is everything. It's the best. Why wouldn't you want to put it in your body?
And have you had anything that surprised you so far, either good or bad, from, what your expectations might have been going in, but has anything sort of caught you unawares?
I think that my particular ease of being able to just drop those grains and wheats and say adios did actually surprise me. I was concerned that I would still struggle with that. I know a lot of people struggle with it months and maybe even years later, that they just can't let it go. But I was able to let that go, and I am very thankful for that. It has made the journey a lot easier, not obsessing about that stuff.
Yes, I mean, like we were saying before, it's the big change for you with not being hungry all the time. So I guess you probably assumed going in that you were going to find it really, really hard to give up those things. So like you say, it's great not to. And how have you navigated your way through all the enormous wealth of information there is out there? Because I know some people who talk about when they started, maybe 10 years ago, there wasn't so much out there, but now there is this vast array of information, and a lot of it quite contradictory. So how have you steered a course through that?
That is a great question, because I think it's been intuition. I had all of the experiences about 12 years ago when I was diagnosed, and the experience I had with the Hallelujah diet, which was that mostly very close to vegan, vegetarian diet, and there are some good things that came out of that. I'm not completely giving it a hard time, but I had all that time with that and all that experience with it, and then just always being aware of what I was putting in my body, whether or not I had given up or not. I was aware of it. And then I come to this new information, and it's mind-blowing. It's completely opposite of everything we're taught. And somehow it just seemed right. I just couldn't wrap my head around the vegetarian thing. I did it. I was proactive for it, but at the same time I was like, there's something with it, but it's working for now, until it didn't. But it felt right. It sounded good. I started doing it. I was getting results. I thought, okay. I was luckily led to the good podcasts, the good forums. I think that once you hit on one of them, that is a good source, a proper source of good information in keto world, then the branching out from that is going to be also good sources of information.
Oh, that's a very good point, actually. And I think, yes, I think maybe that is what happens with some people, that they don't necessarily start in the good place or the good place for them. And that's why they then start seeking something else, and they can end up pinging from one place to another and ending up with, I've spoken to so many people who say, well, I don't know what to do, because one person's telling me to eat loads of protein and not eat too much fat. Well, another person's telling me to eat loads of fat and not eat much protein. Someone's telling me I need this many carbs. Someone's telling me I don't, I really need to keep them to this level or below. Another person's telling me I need to, carb cycle. Another person's telling me I need to fast. Someone else is telling me, no, don't fast. And it's, there are so many different opinions out there. And if you bounce around too much, very difficult. But it sounds like you were lucky. Like you say, you found a good place to start, a good solid place. And I mean, the ketogenic forums is a wonderful solid place to start. And then you can branch out from there. But it's nice to know, isn't it, that you've got that sensible, solid foundation place to go back to. If you do start hearing these contradictory opinions, you've got somewhere you can go back and ask people you can rely on for answers.
Absolutely. I mean, that is exactly it. I started out with Live and La Vida Low Carb, went right to Keto Do's. I think those are the two greatest resources, plus the obesity podcast, Fasting Talk, and your wonderful podcast. I mean, it's like this family, this close-knit family. And if you hear about one, you're going to hear about the others.
That's right.
And just go for it and go listen to them and go read the books. Good calories, bad calories, the big fat surprise, the case against sugar, keto clarity, cholesterol clarity, the cookbooks. I mean, there's such an amazing wealth of good, proper information that I just want to shout it to the world.
Yes, we all get a bit evangelical about it, don't we? We start coming off a little bit crazy sometimes, because any problem that someone says they have, it does really seem like keto would be the answer. So you do start to sound a bit like a stuck record. Yeah, I do. And I really have to literally bite my tongue at work sometimes. When people talk all the time at lunchtime, they talk about their personal situations and all this stuff. And I'm like, I know we can fix that. But then again, you see, I mean, that's what happened to you. So your friend, that's exactly what your friend did with you, and it was the right answer. So
she did. I'm so glad she spoke up. I really am, because she also told me I don't ever say anything because people just wave you off or look like you're crazy, but you look like you're already headed in the right direction. So that's why she said something. And I was like, thank God. Thank God.
And where is your blood glucose now? What are your levels like now? Have you seen an improvement with these couple of months of keto?
Absolutely. I went down from the 120s after my 4-day fasting hit the 70s, and I did a 3-day fast and a 5-day fast and a 4.5-day fast after that, just like one after the other. And I'm now always in the 80s and the 90s with the occasional 70s.
Wow. And I did look that up. I looked that up because, again, it's, although I kind of got the numbers, but I'm not used to it. So I looked it up, and a 4.4 to 5, which, I mean, incredible. Those are numbers to be envious about now, aren't they?
Oh, I'm so happy. I am so thrilled with it, especially just in these beginning steps, these beginning months. And I fully intend for that to be consistently in the 70s, start hitting down in the 60s, and then I can start stepping down my medication because I am still on a 1,000 milligram 2 times a day dose of metformin. And I know that's really high. So I want to get to the point where that's maybe 1 pill a day or no pills a day and still consistently be in those 70s range. Because I think 70s are the numbers to be in. I think that's, people talk about 80s, 90s, and the low 100s are okay too. And all right, but when you're getting into the 100s, to me, that's just too high, if you're consistently up there.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wake up at 107 or if right before bed it's 107, I understand that. But it better regulate out into the 80s during the day, which is my goal is to consistently be there.
And you've had a nice drop with your A1C as well, I believe.
Oh, yes. It's exciting because when I first got diagnosed back in 2007, I started out with a horrible 12.5 or something awful like that.
Ouch.
And then I got down to 6.5 during those 9 months that I was trying real hard and losing that weight. And I had stepped down some of my medicine at that point, and then I ballooned. And then all that stuff happened, and all those years went by that I gave up. I came back up to an 11.4, and that was the last reading I had back in July 2016. And then when I went back, December, the end of December, right in the beginning of January, I had a 7.1.
Wow.
So it is dropping like a stone,
yeah,
and I cannot wait. In May, I have my 3-month checkup since my 7.1 reading, and I know it will be lower. I can't wait. I hope it's 6 or something like that.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing what that is. We'll have to do an update to hear about
I'd love
that.
to.
I was asking in my Facebook group for a few questions, and we've been discussing some of those, but had a funny one that came up. I think it was Cheryl Miller who threw out this question, which seemed a bit weird. Are you an ant or a bee? And I said, what on earth does that mean? And she says, well, an ant makes a decision and proceeds single-mindedly, but a bee takes more of a circuitous route with some backtracking to get to their goals. And I think I know which you are now after having spoken to you, but I'm guessing you're an ant.
You just totally
go straight for it.
I'm a bull ant. I research everything to death, and I try to follow that straight and narrow line, and I want those results. It's like I have the hope again. I see this light finally at the end of this tunnel, and I'm like, I'm running. I'm going to get there. It's this long marathon, and I'm building up my leg muscles and my heart muscle as I go, and it's going to happen. It's not if, it's when. And I'm just really thankful. I'm thankful that this exists. I'm thankful I'm able to do it. And I don't see myself backtracking. Like, if it might be a mistake that I make that I didn't realize at the time, if that were the case. But will I ever go back to glutens, grains, wheat? No, never.
No, I have great confidence in you. Yeah. I think the thing that strikes me is the biggest difference. Yeah, you do have this single-minded attitude that you've shown before, and that you've succeeded before in bringing down your blood glucose and losing weight. But it was a real struggle. You felt hungry all the time. You had plateaus that you had to try and deal with. This time, you've been able to apply that same single-mindedness, but you haven't been having to fight hunger. So,
no.
Yeah, it seems like it's a much easier ride this time. So why would you give that up?
So is. Exactly. And so many people get into keto way of eating for weight loss, and that is a part of it, but only in the sense that I'm in it for the health reasons. And when I get healthy, I lose weight. It's like a side effect. And that is where I'm at in my mind frame right now, is it's health first, and weight loss will happen as it happens. And so far, I've lost 17 pounds since, I want to say, July, because that's the first time I had even thought about starting to do anything. That's when I did start with getting rid of the wheats and the grains. So it had been 14, and then this past month I lost 3 more pounds, and with my 1 month chunk up. So I'm really happy about that.
Fantastic. And like you say, a lot of people do come to it for weight loss, but they stay with it for the health benefits.
Right. I have 100 You have 100 to lose. So, it'll happen when it happens. I do have a little impatient streak in me sometimes, but then I mitigate that and remind myself why I'm here, and then I feel better again. It's all good.
Of course. Yeah. Well, fantastic. It's been great talking to you today, and I like to wrap up by asking my guests for a top tip that they'd like to share with the listeners. So I'd be thrilled to hear what yours is.
Okay. I've been thinking about this, and it's really not easy coming up with a top tip. It is so personal to everybody and so different. So I think the best tip I can give is keep it simple. Keep it simple with your diet. Don't try to go crazy with all the different recipes. Stick with things that are simple and easy, that you love, that are delicious, and then bring stuff in one by one and build up that menu that you can choose from, and educate yourself. I have to add in that second point because you really need the education to be able to do this successfully. So read the good books, listen to Keto Dudes, 2 Keto Dudes from the first episode. It will blow your mind. They have such an amazing structure as they go along. I just can't say enough about it.
Works well, doesn't it?
And yeah, I think that would be your recipe for success right there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for sharing your story, and we'll check in with you a bit further along your journey to find out, well, all the rest of the achievements you've been ticking off along the way. Sounds like you've made such a flying start.
Oh, I would love to check in with you again, and I can't wait to see myself what I'll be like in the next few months. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jeannie. It's been a pleasure. To get the resources and links from the show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you want to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. If you fancy joining me on this exciting adventure and want to help me create new episodes, please go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/ketowoman, or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman podcast website. It's thanks to the 2 Keto Dudes that I'm hosting this podcast, so please consider heading to their Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com and help them bring you more podcasts like this one. Please help other people hear about and find this podcast by reviewing the show on iTunes and Facebook. Every star and review really does help. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. This week's quote is from Napoleon Hill. The starting point of all achievement is desire. Bye-bye, Keto Lovelies.